Stefanie Powers, known to many as a captivating presence from the golden age of American television, was born Stefania Zofia Paul on November 2nd, 1942, in Hollywood, California. The journey that led her to become one of television's most enduring stars is inextricably linked to her Polish ancestry, the complex structure of Hollywood's old studio system, and the personal experiences that shaped her life. In her Polish-language autobiography, she mentions that her original surname was Federkiewicz, and she has also noted that her name in Polish translates closely to Federkowicz. The metamorphosis from her birth name to the more streamlined Stefanie Powers was put in motion when she was still very young, just 16, after Columbia Pictures offered her a studio contract. At the time, it was a common custom to alter names to something that felt more palatable to mainstream American audiences, especially if a performer was to be marketed nationally or even internationally. This name adjustment was one small but telling detail in a period when personal identity often came second to the demands of a film studio seeking to forge a new star. Born into a family with a heritage that reached back to Poland, Powers experienced some upheaval during her childhood. Her parents' marriage ended in divorce, and she had a distant relationship with her father. Publicly, she barely referenced him, and in her memoir, One from the Heart, she alluded to the tension and unhappiness caused by his presence. Though she left him largely unnamed, the emotional turbulence surrounding that relationship figured in her formative years. It was her mother, Juliana Demetria Golan, herself a first-generation American daughter of Polish parents, who became the bedrock of Powers' life. Juliana ultimately passed away in Los Angeles at the age of 96 from pneumonia, and it was her unwavering support that Powers remembered most fondly. One can imagine how that maternal influence, shaped by a Polish-American upbringing and tough immigrant values, helped instill in Powers an impressive resilience and industriousness, qualities that would later define her storied career. Powers' immediate family included her older brother, Jeffrey Julian Paul, and a half-sister, Diane Pascoe Hanson Bailey, who died in 2000. The family's move within the orbit of Los Angeles exposed Stefanie to the glitter of Hollywood at an age when most young people are still grappling with teenage concerns. Indeed, Powers was a cheerleader at Hollywood High School, a school that already had a reputation for producing big names in entertainment. She briefly overlapped there with Nancy Sinatra, though Sinatra graduated from University High in June 1958. Still, it's fascinating to consider how these parallel paths through LA's educational system created networks of aspiring entertainers. As an anecdote from that era, it's said that Powers observed a shifting entertainment landscape, even from her vantage point on the cheer squad. The studio system was adapting to new consumer tastes, teen idols were emerging, and early rock and roll's popularity was giving a new beat to the culture. She would soon join the wave of young actors whose careers hovered between the disappearing aura of old Hollywood and the more experimental, often grittier style of the 1960s. Early on, when she was still billed under a different name, Powers managed to land a few secondary roles in various film projects. One lesser-known piece of trivia is that she was credited as Taffy Paul in a little-seen independent feature called The Young Sinner, 1965. Even the title The Young Sinner might conjure up the sense of moral quandaries and rebellious themes that were becoming more common in films of that period. So it's compelling to note that Powers' transformation from Taffy Paul to Stefanie Powers mirrored the shifting moods of cinema itself. As her on-screen career took shape, she made appearances in a variety of 1960s productions: Experiment, In Terror If a Man Answers, and McClintock, among them. She popped up in Tammy Tell Me True, 1961, in the role of a schoolgirl, and then she played Bunny, the police chief's daughter, in Palm Springs Weekend, 1963. Though these were supporting parts, each contributed to a growing resume that eventually gave her the professional muscle to snag larger roles. She also featured in The Interns, 1962, and its sequel, The New Interns, 1964, modest hospital dramas that gave perspective on a profession in flux in that era. Nurses and doctors were often portrayed as heroic, stalwart figures, and the popularity of medical shows and films soared. In 1965, Powers starred opposite the inimitable Tallulah Bankhead in Die, Die, My Darling. The latter was a psychological horror film that showcased the intensities of controlling mother figures, an interesting parallel or contrast to the supportive maternal presence Powers herself had in real life. Tallulah Bankhead's reputation as a grande dame of stage and screen undoubtedly influenced the young actress, whether as a stark demonstration of how to command a scene or as a cautionary tale about the toll that fame can exact on one's personal life. Interestingly, 1966 brought Powers to a pivotal turn. She was cast in a starring role as April Dancer in The Girl from UNCLE. This show functioned as a spin-off to the popular spy series The Man from UNCLE, capitalizing on the 1960s craze for espionage thrillers. In that swirl of James Bond mania, the female agent April Dancer was meant to stand out. Glamorous, resourceful, and without the standard license to kill, she often relied on charm and quick wits, rather than the more brutal methods used by male counterparts. What's also notable is that her name, April Dancer, apparently came from the fertile imagination of writer Ian Fleming, who had contributed at least nominally to the original show's conceptual background. The Girl from UNCLE struggled in the ratings, lasting only one season, from September 16, 1966 to April 11, 1967. But it left behind a curious historical imprint. At a moment when spy shows were dominating the networks, it introduced a female-driven narrative that was somewhat ahead of its time. Even though it ran briefly, Powers gained significant visibility, enough that she was featured on the cover of TV Guide. That piece described how she maintained her supple 117-pound figure by performing 11 minutes of Royal Canadian Air Force exercises each morning, an amusing snapshot of how celebrity workouts were marketed to viewers back then. After The Girl from UNCLE, Powers made an appearance in Warning Shot, 1967, playing alongside David Janssen. Stepping into the 1970s, she was involved in The Beatniks, 1970, Herbie Rides Again, 1972, and The Magnificent Seven Ride, 1972, the last of those being a continuation of the Magnificent Seven story, albeit without the original star power of Yul Brynner in the leading role. Perhaps more portentous for her future was her guest spot in the Robert Wagner series, It Takes a Thief, in 1970. At the time, few would have predicted that Powers would eventually share enormous on-screen chemistry with Wagner in their iconic show, Heart to Heart, which debuted almost a decade later. Before landing that signature role, she starred as Tony Feather Danton in The Feather and Father Gang, a crime-solving series pairing a slick ex-con man father with a straight-laced lawyer daughter. Unfortunately, this show only lasted half a season, 13 episodes. However, it offered a further platform for Powers to refine the light, comedic, and dramatic balance that would become her hallmark. She kept busy with a wealth of guest spots on popular TV shows like Lancer, 1969, McCloud, 1971, The Mod Squad, 1972, and Kung Fu, 1974. She turned up in The Rockford Files, 1975. Three for the Road, 1975. The $6 Million Man, 1976. The Bionic Woman, 1976. and Macmillan and Wife, 1977. By that point, she had signed a contract with Universal Studios in 1970, making her part of a stable of contract players who were assigned to fill out many of the studio's television projects. Her friend and future co-star Robert Wagner also had a similar deal, though ironically, they seldom ended up crossing paths on the same series until they joined forces for Heart to Heart. In 1977, Powers portrayed Sally Whalen in the 6-part miniseries Washington, Behind Closed Doors, produced by Paramount Television. That ensemble included the formidable talents of Cliff Robertson, Jason Robards, Robert Vaughn, Lois Nettleton, and John Houseman, giving Powers an opportunity to collaborate with respected veterans. The following year, she starred in A Death in Canaan alongside Paul Clemens and Brian Dennehy. Directed by Tony Richardson, it was based on the real-life case that journalist Joan Barthel helped bring to public attention. For Powers, who played the writer Barthel, the film signified a foray into more issue-focused drama, exploring how small-town justice could sometimes be overshadowed by prejudice and sensationalism. Interestingly, A Death in Canaan marked the American television directing debut of Richardson and was later Emmy-nominated, suggesting that even in a TV movie capacity, Powers had a penchant for attaching herself to projects with substantive scripts. Another theatrical endeavor in 1978 saw her on stage with Stacy Keach in Cyrano de Bergerac at the Central Theater in Long Beach. Though the run was not lengthy, the chance to participate in a classic piece of dramatic literature underscored her versatility as an actress, comfortable in comedic, dramatic, and theatrical settings. That same year, she joined an ambitious cinematic project, Escape to Athena, 1979, filmed in the Dodecanese islands of Greece. Starring Roger Moore, Telly Savalas, David Niven, Sonny Bono, and Elliot Gould, it was a caper featuring a motley crew of Allied prisoners who attempt to free themselves while also protecting valuable Greek antiquities. Interestingly, that turned out to be her last theatrical film for quite a long time, as she would not return to the big screen until 2020 with The Artist's Wife. Arguably the role that propelled her to widespread recognition was that of Jennifer Hart in the mystery series Heart to Heart, which began airing in 1979. Co-starring with Robert Wagner as Jonathan Hart, she portrayed half of a wealthy, adventurous couple who found themselves in a parade of criminal entanglements, demonstrating an enviable mix of high glamour and detective savvy. The show, which ran 5 seasons, 1979 to 1984, became emblematic of 1980s television style. The comedic flair, romantic synergy between the leads, and formulaic whodunit structure built a devoted fan base. Powers and Wagner would reunite multiple times for 8 heart-to-heart reunion films throughout the 1990s, each one effectively tapping into the nostalgia for the show's breezy romance and comedic detective storylines. Her involvement in Heart to Heart earned her 2 Emmy Award nominations for Best Actress in a television series, along with 5 Golden Globe nominations, cementing her legacy as a beloved TV icon. Beyond that peak of popularity, she sustained a robust career with further television miniseries, including Mistral's Daughter, 1984, based on Judith Krantz's novel, and a dual role as twins in Deceptions, 1985, an opportunity to show both her dramatic range and the entertaining spectacle of one actress tackling 2 different personalities. 2 years later, she starred as the real-life Frances Schroeder in At Mother's Request, 1987. This true crime story followed the case of a manipulative mother encouraging her teenage son to commit murder, a clear departure from the more whimsical detective shows that had typified Powers's career. The script was adapted by Richard DeLong Adams, with Michael Tuckner directing, and it reminded audiences that Powers could deftly handle darker roles that challenge viewers' notions of maternal love. By the early 1990s, she was also dipping into musical theater. In London, she starred with John Barrowman in Matador at the Queen's Theatre, a production that sought to dramatize the legend of El Cordobés, a famous Spanish bullfighter. Directed by Elijah Moshinsky, with choreography by Arlene Phillips and flamenco artist Rafael Aguilar, Matador gave Powers a chance to bring her stage presence to a story that combined high drama with Spanish cultural motifs. Later, she joined Robert Wagner for a stage production of A.R. Gurney's Love Letters, in which the pair read from scripts as two characters separated by geography, exchanging letters over 40 years. The production's simple staging, focusing on the spoken word, was a testament to their on-stage chemistry. It was also the vehicle that earned Powers the Sarah Siddons Award in 1993, acknowledging her excellence in theater. She continued to chase musical theater projects, touring in productions like Applause, in a role originally made famous by Lauren Bacall, The King and I, and other stage adaptations. A possible revival of Applause on Broadway never came to fruition, but Powers took her portrayal of Anna Leonowens in The King and I around the United Kingdom in 2002, followed by a U.S. tour in 2004 and 2005. These roles required her to demonstrate consistent vocal ability, stamina, and an understanding of classical musical theater staging. Not to be confined to acting alone, Powers also tried her hand at singing, releasing a music CD titled On the Same Page in 2003. This album was largely drawn from the Great American Songbook tradition, a nod to the mid-20th century standards popularized by the likes of Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald. On television from 2006 onward, she was a guest host and presenter for Through the Keyhole, a long-running panel show where celebrities guess whose home is being toured. Powers even stepped into the realm of British soap-style drama with a storyline on BBC's Doctors, playing a wealthy businesswoman named Jane Powers, who becomes embroiled in an uncomfortably close relationship triangle that threatens her impending wedding. That 2000 to 2001 arc on Doctors demonstrated her knack for blending comedic tension with melodrama. A warm reunion with Robert Wagner took place on April 30th, 2008, when the two appeared on The Graham Norton Show for a special heart-to-heart segment. Their enduring camaraderie was on full display, no doubt reminding viewers of the easy banter that made them popular decades prior. In 2011, Powers was among the contestants on the British reality show I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, plunging into a jungle environment that tested her resilience. She was, however, the first participant eliminated on November 25th, 2011, a surprising result for fans who expected her to last longer, given her adventurous spirit. Yet it revealed the unpredictability of reality television voting patterns and the difficulty celebrities face when adapting to living conditions far removed from their usual comforts. In 2013, she starred in the stage play Loop, focusing on her earlier co-star, Tallulah Bankhead. That same year, Powers contributed to the pre-Broadway run of a dance-focused musical called Gotta Dance, later retitled Halftime, about a group of senior citizens who unexpectedly become hip-hop dancers. Debuting in Chicago, it was directed and choreographed by Jerry Mitchell, featuring Broadway stalwarts like Georgia Engel Andre de Shields, and Lilias White. Powers' involvement signaled her willingness to keep testing the boundaries of what roles and mediums she could handle, even many decades into her career. There was also the 2017 announcement that she would participate in a developmental reading of Love Affair, a musical inspired by the 1939 film, a testament to her continued presence in new theatrical projects. She returned to feature film screens in 2018, co-starring in The Artist's Wife, which was released by Strand Releasing in 2020. Directed by Tom Dolby and led by Bruce Dern and Lena Olin, this independent film centered around the struggles of an aging painter diagnosed with Alzheimer's and the impact it had on his wife, herself a once promising artist. Powers portrayed a performance artist named Ada Risi, adding gravitas to a narrative about artistry, memory, and the heartbreaking fragility of creative minds. The project was warmly received by those who admired character-driven storytelling. Also in 2018, she took a lead role in a UK stage tour of 84 Charing Cross Road, adapted from Helene Hanff's novel. This comedic yet poignant drama recounts the unlikely pen-pal friendship between a New York writer and a London bookshop clerk over 20 years. Powers embraced the role of Helene Hanff, while veteran actor Clive Francis portrayed Frank Dull. This stage adaptation not only allowed Powers to once again delve into the complexities of a real-life figure, but also to connect with audiences in a story about the allure of literature, the warmth of human connections, and the bittersweet reality of missed opportunities. Over her career, Powers has garnered numerous accolades. Beyond her multiple Emmy and Golden Globe nods for Heart to Heart, she received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1992, located at 6007 Hollywood Boulevard. That recognition highlighted her meaningful contributions to television, and her acceptance speech reportedly referenced the sense of gratitude she felt toward the many colleagues who shaped her path. The Sarah Siddons Award in 1993 recognized her theatrical performances, particularly her role in Love Letters. In Germany, she accepted the Steiger Award on March 12, 2011 for her achievements in the arts, and in 2017, Palm Springs Women in Film and Television honored her with their 9th annual Broken Glass Award, which is given to women who exemplify groundbreaking accomplishment in entertainment and philanthropic work. Beyond the stage and screen, Powers has a deep personal history of philanthropic engagement, notably tied to her late partner, William Holden. She and Holden became romantically involved following her divorce from actor Gary Lockwood in 1972. Holden and Powers shared a passion for wildlife conservation, an interest that grew during visits to Africa, where Holden had a residence in Kenya. After Holden's sudden death in 1981, Powers helped fulfill his dream by establishing the William Holden Wildlife Foundation. As the founding president, she dedicated herself to raising funds and awareness for endangered species, environmental sustainability, and the protection of natural habitats in Kenya. The foundation, along with the Mount Kenya Game Ranch and Wildlife Conservancy in Nanyuki, Kenya, became channels through which she could manifest a vision of conservation. In the United States, she has collaborated closely with the Cincinnati Zoo and the Atlanta Zoo. These commitments have made her a sought-after international speaker on wildlife preservation. She recounts that, while originally it was Holden's influence that guided her to Africa, it was the wonder and unpredictability of wildlife that cemented her ongoing devotion. When not working on behalf of conservation efforts or perfecting her craft, Powers has also maintained a fascination with polo. She became one of the first foreign members of the Royal County of Berkshire Polo Club in the UK, which counts none other than HRH, the Prince of Wales, among its members. In 2005, she participated in the Jules UK National Women's Championships at Ascot, reflecting an athletic dimension of her personality that often surprises those who knew her primarily from her polished Hollywood persona. In her personal life, she married Patrick Huit de la Chesnay on April 1st, 1993, but they divorced in 1999. The following year, she entered a relationship with auditor Tom Carroll, which lasted until his death in August 2014. These personal ties and losses seem to reflect the inherent unpredictability of life, especially in an industry where external glamour can sometimes mask profound inner challenges. Powers had a history of smoking, around 20 years, that eventually contributed to a serious health crisis. In November 2008, she was diagnosed with alveolar carcinoma, a form of lung cancer. By January 29, 2009, she had undergone surgery to remove part of her right lung. That same month, her mother passed away at the age of 96 due to pneumonia, adding another layer of grief to an already difficult period. Though she had faced numerous ups and downs, this convergence of health troubles and personal loss stood out as one of her darker chapters. Even in the wake of her surgery, she remained resolute in her philanthropic commitments and her occasional television, film, and stage appearances. Reflecting on her wider worldview, she has disclosed that she was once a campaign supporter of Robert F. Kennedy during the tumultuous year of 1968. While some might wonder how the political climate of the late 1960s dovetailed with the fresh-faced actress who was just making her mark in Hollywood, Powers clearly felt a personal resonance with Kennedy's advocacy for social justice and economic reform. His assassination in June 1968 shocked many in the entertainment industry, underscoring how heavily politics and show business could intersect. Some observers noted that, like many of her peers, Powers was awakened to the fragility of the American dream when national figures she admired were cut down in their prime. Today, the more historically minded fan can trace how Powers' career mirrored key transformations in American television. She began in an era when broadcast networks were at their apex of cultural influence, forging close ties between studios and sponsors who shaped content to a degree unthinkable in the 21st century streaming era. By the 1970s, she could witness a shift toward more socially conscious programming, often anchored by Norman Lear's comedic approach or the gritty detective stories typified by the Rockford Files or Kojak. Her involvement in multiple genres, crime, comedy, miniseries epics, and stage musicals, spoke to a level of versatility that was vital for any performer hoping to remain relevant in a swiftly changing industry. By the time Heart to Heart arrived, it felt like a culmination of that dexterity. The show elegantly combined whimsy, romance, and detective drama, all tinted by a sense of lighthearted escapism that allowed audiences to believe that wealthy, intrepid couples could treat murder cases like weekend puzzles. Besides her professional journeys, it's worth taking a moment to consider how her personal experiences, especially her mother's stalwart guidance, molded a certain grace that fans often perceived in her off-camera persona. Memories of her mother visiting film sets or quietly rooting for her daughter's successes from behind the scenes paint a vivid image of a family dynamic that persevered despite earlier divorces and estrangements. The half-sister Diane, who passed away in 2000, remains part of the narrative mosaic that shaped Powers' life story, reminding us that behind the glamour of an actress's outward achievements are relationships and heartbreaks that can't be easily channeled into star profiles. As for the dynamic with William Holden, Powers has offered glimpses into how deeply that partnership influenced her. Holden was older, a seasoned film star known for such classics as Sunset Boulevard 1950, Stalag 17 1953, and The Bridge on the River Kwai 1957. Yet in his later years, he discovered a fervent commitment to wildlife preservation, a cause that ended up defining Powers's philanthropic life. In interviews, Powers has described feeling a sense of duty to continue this mission not only as an homage to Holden's memory, but also because she found genuine fulfillment in working to ensure future generations could experience the wonder of African wildlife. Not all Hollywood romances extend so meaningfully into philanthropic outcomes, but for Powers, that heartbreak, Holden died in 1981 after a fall, resulted in a type of legacy that transcended show business. In the decades since, Powers has not slowed down in that domain. With typical energy, she has made repeated trips to Kenya, fostering relationships between local communities and the conservancy she co-directs. She has stated that seeing a rhinoceros in its natural habitat or witnessing the migration of wildebeest across the savannah affirms the urgency of her cause. These heartfelt sentiments about wildlife resonate with fans who remember her on-screen presence, revealing an actress whose real-life pursuits carry moral weight. In a particularly symbolic gesture, she sometimes invites school children to experience the Wildlife Foundation's educational programs, believing that the younger generation must be galvanized if conservation efforts are to endure. On the philanthropic front, it's also of note that Powers frequently combined her performing engagements with fundraising. For instance, in certain theatrical tours, she might host benefit nights or partner with local conservation groups. It's an extension of the philanthropic tradition that Hollywood legends like Audrey Hepburn championed with UNICEF, or that Doris Day pursued with animal welfare. Powers' dedication highlights a deeper dimension to her public persona. Far from resting on her laurels as a 1980s icon, she has adapted her platform into a beacon for causes that transcend ephemeral showbiz interests. Turning back to her show business narrative, some fans expressed surprise that her last theatrical film before The Artist's Wife was all the way back in 1979 with Escape to Athena. Yet this gap is understandable when one considers how popular she became on the small screen during the 1980s and 1990s. Television movies, miniseries, and stage musicals probably felt more immediate and personally fulfilling at certain intervals. The reason for that might lie in the ephemeral yet immersive nature of television at the time. Viewers tuned in weekly, forging a close bond with the characters, which Powers surely experienced firsthand with the staggering success of Heart to Heart, when she eventually did return to the big screen. Over 40 years after her heyday in 1960s and 1970s. Hollywood films, it signaled a willingness to explore roles with greater introspection. The Artist's Wife, focusing on themes of aging, identity, and dementia, exemplifies a more contemplative side to the craft of acting, a domain that older performers can sometimes inhabit with particular richness. Powers' presence in that film was a reminder that though she might carry the charm of yesteryear, she is no stranger to confronting the universal struggles of mortality and memory. On a lighter note, her 2011 reality television stint in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Outta Here, added yet another unexpected chapter to a long career. While being the first celebrity eliminated may not have been a highlight, it hints at her adventurous spirit. She was game enough to try living in harsh jungle conditions, albeit with cameras and documenting every moment. Contemporary audiences, raised on a steady diet of reality TV, might find it fascinating that a star of Powers' vintage would sign up for such an endeavor. It emphasizes the ways in which she never quite conformed to being purely a nostalgia figure. She has consistently tried new experiences. Today, when fans reflect on the arc of Stefanie Powers' life, they see a woman shaped by the swirl of post-war Hollywood ambition. Her 1942 birth date placed her near the tail end of that pre-boomer generation. By personal heartaches, by triumphs that married comedic style to detective intrigue, and by philanthropic commitments that reveal an unspoken moral code. If her father's presence was once associated with tension and estrangement, her mother's unwavering devotion, combined with paternal surrogates like William Holden, filled her life with enough emotional grounding to navigate an industry known for its ruthless churn of new talent. She has inhabited roles from an eccentric spy in The Girl from UNCLE to a comedic yet formidable amateur sleuth in Heart to stage musicals that demanded her singing talents. Her health battles since 2008, culminating in surgery for lung cancer and the subsequent partial removal of her right lung, have inevitably led fans to worry about her well-being. Although the timeline of her convalescence coincided tragically with her mother's death, Powers emerged from that period with renewed passion for her philanthropic endeavors and an ongoing respect for self-care, presumably distancing herself from smoking. It's a reminder that behind the glitter of the entertainment world, actors still grapple with human vulnerabilities. Her own reflection on that time suggests humility and an openness to share her cautionary tale with others. As some watchers have noted, the 21st century entertainment landscape is drastically different from the one that launched Powers' career. Yet her ability to remain active, to appear in stage productions well into her later decades, and to step back into film for carefully chosen projects hints at an undiminished enthusiasm for storytelling and performance. She continues to attract fans who remember her from primetime hits, but also draws a new generation interested in those older series now easily accessed on streaming platforms. Even if her name might not be as recognized to contemporary audiences as it once was, Powers remains a revered figure among those who understand the full breadth of television history. In reading or hearing about her life, one senses that the sad aspect alluded to in certain summaries is that, in the face of ongoing health struggles, the inevitable passage of time, and the heartbreak of losing family members and dear friends, Powers' once dazzling horizon has narrowed. Public sightings may be fewer, and she may move through Hollywood's social circuit with less frequency. Some fans see that as a melancholic twist for someone who was so luminous throughout the 1970s and 1980s. Yet focusing only on that sadness would overlook the abiding generosity, wit, and courage she's shown in forging a path well beyond standard television stardom. Her name might not flash across marquee lights with the same fervor as in years past, but her contribution, both in preserving wildlife and in entertaining millions, remains indelible. In the final estimation, Stefanie Powers' life story is about persistence in the face of personal setbacks, a compassionate dedication to philanthropic causes, and a creative spirit that thrived during an era of huge cultural shifts. Whether she was on set with legends like Tallulah Bankhead, forging comedic-laced detective adventures with Robert Wagner, or working alongside peers on the stage to revive beloved musicals, she showed a willingness to embrace each challenge. To this day, she stands as an embodiment of Hollywood's capacity to blend artistry, commerce, and altruism, forging an example of how personal convictions can intersect with professional duties. Those who have followed her career from the beginning might remember her early bit parts, or that famed cameo on the cover of TV Guide as April Dancer. and marvel at how far she traveled within and beyond the entertainment industry. Younger audiences might come to know her primarily through streaming replays of Heart to Heart, or from hearing about her philanthropic work. In either case, Stefanie Powers has woven her own narrative into the broader tapestry of American film and television. She has juggled comedic spark, dramatic intensity, stage flair, philanthropic drive, and personal adversity, all while maintaining a graciousness that many who encountered her describe as truly authentic. As she faces the ordinary and extraordinary challenges of advancing age, there is no denying that her health has become more fragile over time. The alveolar carcinoma diagnosis, along with the partial lung removal, underscores that even a star once known for her energetic on-screen presence can be confronted by the same harrowing diseases as anyone else. However, the fact that she continues to speak publicly, support wildlife causes, and occasionally step on stage or screen suggests a defiance of any neat ending. The narrative is still in progress, albeit quieter, measured, and reflective. That said, her legacy is hardly diminished. She leaves behind a body of work that resonates with multiple generations of viewers, from her 1960s appearances as a teen sensation to her 1980s emergence as a romantic detective star, all the way up through her stage tours of beloved musicals. For fans or anyone newly intrigued, her story might serve as a reminder that behind the glamour of each red carpet photo, behind the comedic banter in a detective series, and behind the philanthropic persona, there is a woman of diverse depth. She's someone who endured heartbreak, embraced opportunities for global travel, advocated strongly for environmental stewardship, and faced down an illness that threatened her life. In many respects, that complicated tapestry, punctuated by Hollywood flair, personal devotion, activism, and survival, puts her in the pantheon of performers whose real-life journeys are as compelling as any script they followed on camera. Thank you for spending time hearing about the life of Stefanie Powers. If you have thoughts or reflections, feel free to share them, as the conversation about an artist's ongoing impact benefits from each new perspective. After all, while her final chapter may eventually draw to a close, as it does for everyone, her contributions to film, television, and environmental activism stand as a testament to how a determined spirit can transform personal passions into public good, leaving a legacy well worth celebrating.